critically important issue, which is the ongoing conflict in the Democratic Republic of Congo that has been heating up as of late. And we are very, very honored to be joined here on the show once again by Kambale Musavuli, who is an analyst with the Center for Research on the Congo, Kinshasa. Kambale, as always, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you for keeping up the Congo on your show.
Well, it's critically important, and it's obviously, one of the most consequential conflicts happening around the world right now. Let's start here. A couple weeks ago, Kambale, there was an attack on an IDP camp, a bombing on the city of Goma in eastern DRC, and, is widely attributed to the M23 rebels. Tell us a little bit about what took place there, because it was a very shocking attack, and what it says about where the state of the conflict is right now.
Prior to the bombing, the M23 rebels, backed by Rwanda, which to an extent, not an extent, they are actually supported by the United States and the United Kingdom. These M23 militia group took over a town, a specific town called Rubaya. Rubaya is actually the capital of coltan, if I may say, right? If you have a cell phone, there's probably coltan in it. And the people who dig the coltan, where it comes from, mostly is in Rubaya. So them taking over the town of Rubaya caused also the Congolese army and the SADC partner, particularly the South African troops, to launch an attack. And in response to that attack, the M23 decided to shoot at civilians. Not just anywhere. They actually launched missiles into a refugee camp, right in Goma, in the neighborhood called Mungunga, and close to also the area where Lac Vert is. Lac Vert is the Green Lake in the eastern part. So they bombed intentionally the two refugee camps. The usual thing has happened. I mean, this is not the first time this has unfolded in the past 2 decades in DRC, where these Rwandan-backed militias, Uganda-backed militias, foreign actors are actually targeting civilians. And as usual, we get the condemnation, right? The United States condemned the attack directly, saying that Rwanda is backing the M23 and they should stop. France does the same. The United Nations does the same. Condemnations are happening, but over 40 people have lost their lives. And the videos are horrific because we were able to get the videos from partners that we have on the ground where you're seeing children dead. I mean, these are images that we are seeing right now. So at the same time, in Gaza, we are seeing our brothers and sisters in Palestine being killed the same way we are seeing what's happening in Goma, right? The images of the children in the refugee camp killed in Goma is the same as what I just saw a couple of days in Rafah. They bombed the building and children were there. And as usual, be it for Palestine or be it for DRC, condemnations are taking place. So what we are saying is we have passed the stage of condemnation, right? We are at the stage where actions has to be taken. And the action that we continue to push at the Center for Research on the DRC is not just to look at Western nations, who are launching condemnation and so on, because it's hypocrisy, right? They are behind the conflict in the DRC. We are calling more on African nations. How come, up until now, I have yet seen a condemnation from the AU for the attacks? At least I have not seen that come out. I've not seen most African countries even speak out about the killing of civilians in a refugee camp. This is a war crime, right? I'm not hearing ICC investigation on the bombing of refugees. And the death toll in DRC has reached over 6 million people. Yet there is no action. So there needs to be greater accountability for African leaders, for African institutions around the situation in the Congo. And we should be clear about why they're being killed. That's why I started to in explaining that when the rebels took over the area that has the coltan, Congolese bear the brunt by dying, right, through the missile that dropped. So there is a direct connection with the illicit trade, illicit exploitation of Congo's resources, and the effect that it has on the people. So you can't just talk about the bombing without actually pointing out that these militias went after content that is found in our electronic devices. And most of us will go ahead and start getting new phones the next day, believing what Tim Cook said, that they don't use any minerals coming from DRC, which is preposterous. It's impossible for Apple not using Congo's resources. And we are losing our lives in DRC, and we want it to end.
You know, Kambale, can you elaborate a bit on that? I want you to break down who's benefiting, right? Because you talk about there's just condemnations, no action, but actually having some action would actually harm certain people's profits. So who's benefiting from all of this? I mean, why would African leaders be quiet? Why would Western leaders be quiet? What are they getting out of this ongoing conflict, this war in the Congo? And when we talk about the various forces involved, are they proxies for anyone in particular?
Yeah. I'll start from a very general perspective. You can talk about the situation in Congo without actually pointing out capitalism and what it has done in DRC, right? The access of Congo's resources is actually fueling the fourth industrial revolution. So when we start hearing people such as Elon Musk sending satellites to space and trying to provide internet to the world, he can't do that without Congo's cobalt, right? We're hearing this new VR headset from Apple being shipped to houses costing $3,000 to $4,000, making maximum profit from it. They cannot do this headset without Congo's coltan, right? So, from a general perspective, that the fact that we benefit in electronic devices that we use, we don't question how these devices are actually made. But at the very root of it, the resources are coming from the DRC, and the Congolese people are affected. On a geopolitical sense, right? Since 1996, Congo has known a war that hasn't ended. It has manifested itself in many different ways. And this war has been instigated by two of Congo's neighbors, Rwanda and Uganda, who are actually US and British allies on the so-called war on terror. What does that actually mean? Rwandan soldiers have actually done military operations for the benefit of the United States and France on the African continent and abroad. Rwandan soldiers were in Haiti, part of the UN missions. They were in Mali. They were in Central African Republic. Just lately, Rwandan soldiers are in Mozambique, where the European Union, just last year, gave Rwanda $20 million for military aid, some of which will be used for the military operation in Mozambique. But what is happening in Mozambique, right? They're telling us that we have jihadists. That's not what we have. What we do have is that we have Total, a French oil company, that it has access to one of the vast reserves of methane gas and oil there. And Rwandan soldiers are protecting those interests. So because of the interest that Rwanda, and be it even Uganda, with the Ugandan troops being in Iraq, being in Afghanistan, the UK government trying to move refugees from the UK to Rwanda and paying Rwanda 150 million pounds for that service. Because of how the West benefits, no matter what Rwanda and Uganda do in the DRC, they don't hold them accountable. Sometimes I even have said that Rwanda is the Israel of Africa. No matter what he does in the Congo, no matter what invasions he commits, no matter what support he provides to militia group, with evidence that exists, nothing is done to them. So that's our own geopolitical sense. For African leaders, many African leaders are sometimes confused about the situation in the Congo. On one hand, you have Tony Blair, who has presented Paul Kagame as a great leader for the African continent. Bill Clinton presenting Museveni and Kagame as the Renaissance leaders of Africa. So they look at these leaders as people who are actually transforming the African continent. We should be worried of that, right? Because Sekou Touré told us in some of his speeches, right, Sekou Touré of Guinea, that whenever Western nations are praising African leaders, we should know that they have betrayed the people. Because they can't praise them for their work, because most of the time, some of the African leaders are actually affecting the situation of the people. So we finding ourselves with African leaders who are misinformed around the conflict in the Congo, where they think it's an ethnic conflict, where they think it's Congolese killing each other, when we don't make the weapons, we don't manufacture the weapons, or it can be an ethnic conflict because we have over 400 ethnic groups. So which tribe is fighting whom? So we know it's a war of aggression. And through that war, our resources are leaving the Congo at a very cheap price, a penny on the dollar, and finding its way on the world market. So that's actually the system. But the freedom of the Congo is tied to what Kwame Nkrumah said in Challenge of the Congo. Kwame Nkrumah understood that the challenge of the Congo is both internal and external. Congolese are fighting on the inside. That's why millions have died. They're not dying just waiting, right? They're resisting as well. But he understood that Congolese, as they fight their internal challenges, it will be hard for them to deal with the World Bank and the IMF in Washington, D.C., with the U.S. providing military support to neighboring countries. That is always called for international solidarity for the Congolese struggle. Today, in 2024, that call of Nkrumah, of being at the side of the Congolese, of building a United States of Africa with a capital in Kinshasa, is much more urgent today than before, because we're really at a crossroad in Africa. And that crossroad that we are actually looking at in Africa is between the win of Pan-Africanist will, left Pan-Africanist will for transformation. And we are seeing that in Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, and Senegal, where the people of that area have been able to organize, some to military means, others to so-called democratic processes, that they all are transforming the country and saying, if Senegal is free, we have to tie it to the liberation of Africa. That's what Diomaye Faye of Senegal has said. This is the same thing as the leaders of Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger have said. So the movement, the new revival of left Pan-Africanism on the continent has to be connected to the liberation of the DRC. Because if Congo is not free, it will make it hard for Africa to advance based on its size, second largest African country by size, fourth largest African country by population, endowed with mineral resources estimated at $24 trillion, where Kwame Nkrumah knew that would be the engine for the transformation of Africa. So with the revival of Pan-Africanism today, the call for the liberation of Congo is very important for people to join us in solidarity to stop the carnage, stop the killing, stop the genocide of the Congolese people.
Well, I'm glad you spoke to that, the Pan-African issue, and especially the issue of sort of the rollback of French neocolonialism. And the final thing I want to ask you here in relationship to that in the last few minutes is the recent trip by President Felix Tshisekedi to France. There's a viral video, of course, of him saying something about China-Africa relations, and I have to say I found it a bit ironic because the whole trip was him really inviting France to come in an even greater way to exploit the Congo. So I was hoping you could just talk about that a little bit because I felt that side of the trip, didn't really make it onto the viral social media clips.
It did. And Africa is dealing with a lot of contradictions right now, especially around our leaders, right? Where we have African leaders who don't represent the will of the people, who are trying to posture themselves as independent decision makers, not for the benefit of the masses, but for the benefit of the elite of the country. On one hand, that sounds great. African leaders are standing up to Western nations, so let's make sure we support their will. But it does not represent the will of the Congolese people. His visit in France is very telling. On May 1st, May Day, right? On May Day, where we are celebrating workers around the world, the Congolese president was meeting with the military school, the War College in France, to strengthen military collaboration between the DRC and France. Wow! Western African countries, right? West African countries such as Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso have told the United States to leave, have told France to leave. So when France and the United States are being kicked out of West Africa, they need a place to go. They chief leaders, right? The leaders that they support are inviting them back in the country. And that's not the interest of the Congolese people. How do I know that? Because the Congolese, during this year, during the protests, right, against the M23, young Congolese went into the French embassy and burned the French flag and said that the French are supporting Rwanda, killing supporting rebels in the Congo, killing Congolese. Congolese went in front of the U.S. embassy and burned the U.S. flag, saying the same. Went to the British embassy and burned the British flag. Went to the EU representation in Kinshasa and burned the EU flag because they say the hypocrisy of the West supporting Rwanda and Uganda in the invasions of the Congo, we should denounce it. But now our president is going to sign that. It's complete contradiction to where the people are actually at the moment. But what actually gives me even much hope is that I am clear that the Congolese people are not in support of the regime. I'm clear that the Congolese people have shown the world where they stand as it relates to France, as it relates to the United States, the EU, and the UK, and even Belgium, if I may say, and that they are saying that in our struggle to liberate ourselves, we need you to lift up our voices wherever you are, to tell the people we are resisting and call out the negative forces, external forces, making it harder for us on the inside to transform our country.
Well, as always, Kambale, we really appreciate you joining and helping us sort through all of this and illuminate a lot of what is not known to many. Again, Kambale Musavuli is an analyst with the Center for Research on Congo, Kinshasa. Thanks so much for some of your time here on the Freedom Side.
Thank you always. See you next time.